those here at CTU. I too want to just give a warm welcome to all of you who are here today, some who are students here at CTU, but some who are guests and visitors to CTU as well. And we're just so delighted you could join us today at the Ministry Showcase. My name is Ryan Hoffman. I used to work here at CTU until about a month ago, so I'm a little bit in transition currently. I'm also a graduate student here at CTU, and I was helping Aquia plan the showcase as if she needed any help, really, before. So I'm back, so to speak, for a little bit, and just so delighted to be with you. One of the things we wanted to do in the showcase as one of our goals is we kind of got the theoretical, conceptual founding by Father Mark Francis this morning in his keynote address about what are we talking about when we say ministry, and what does that mean, and how does it relate to church and theology and faith. And as you know, he did such a phenomenal job of kind of laying out some of those key pieces. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to drill in a little bit to some of the specifics of what that could look like. And what better way to do that than to hear from people out in the field who are doing various diverse ministries in Chicago, but really have worked all over the country in diverse ministries. And one of the ways we wanted to frame this is, when you think about ministry, what are the types of things that people are looking for, the church is looking for from our ministers? What are the gifts? What are the talents? What are the skills, the charisms, et cetera, that are being lifted up, or that we would like to lift up for those who are doing ministry today? And so, again, what better way to kind of get a sense of that than to talk to people and ask them, people who've been out there in these ministries, saying, from your perspective, what are some of the real important keys you feel are being brought forth, or that God is calling us to bring forth in those working in ministry today? And so this may be for just FYI for some of you. Some of you may be job searching or starting to job search soon. Some of you may have just started a job. Some of you have maybe been in a ministry for years and are looking to maybe just, what are maybe some new ideas, some fresh perspectives, some different strategies? Wherever you are, however you come to us today, I think this will be a great conversation. And so let's start that conversation. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to introduce all of them briefly and just let them share with you a little bit about some of the things that they've reflected on in preparing for today. And then the bulk, the real heart of what we want to do is interact with our audience. So I can talk, and I'll be done soon, I promise. And then we'll let them expand upon kind of their perspective. But really, this is a conversation. So that means we want some dialogue, and we want some people to take some risks in asking questions and to follow up and to say, hey, can you talk more about this? Or what about this? Or, oh, I was intrigued by this. That's what it's about. So let's start. I want to introduce Michael Rizicki first. See, I even practiced a little bit his name. So he has spent 17 years in ministry, 10 working professionally in areas of liturgy, music, and adult faith formation. After hearing the call to ministry beginning in high school, he earned degrees from Catholic University of America. That's all right, we'll let it slide. In Washington Theological, again. He currently serves as director of music for Notre Dame de Chicago Parish and is on the editorial team at Liturgy Training Publications. Pam Coster in the purple there. She is the executive director at Charis Ministries here in Chicago. It's a Jesuit-run ministry. She has worked in ministry, though, for 15 years. She has director of faith formation at Saints Faith, Hope, and Charity Parish in Winnetka, is a board member of Catholics on Call. She holds a master's degree in religious ed from Loyola Chicago and an MBA from the University of Chicago. All right, going down the line, Carol Walters began her ministerial career in volunteer parish ministry. After gaining additional, she served as a pastoral associate at St. Andrew Parish for 6 years. For the last 6 years, she has served as the director of the Office for Lay Ecclesial Ministry for the Archdiocese of Chicago. Mary Amor is a monthly columnist and author of Primary Symbols of Worship, The Call to Participation, and numerous articles on spirituality. She is a member of the North American Academy of Liturgy and has served as the Director of Liturgy and Adult Formation at St. Mary of Goston Parish in Downers Grove, Illinois. She is also the Executive Director at Maze Lake Ministries in Lombard. And Sister Brazda, is that right? Brazda. See, the one I didn't think I would have a problem with. So, let's see. Are you in the? Oh, the first one, of course. See, that's how God works sometimes, right? You know, member of the Congregation of St. Joseph, began her career in ministry as an educator, serving in both elementary and high schools in the Archdiocese of Chicago. Later, she served as a pastoral associate of Notre Dame de Chicago Parish for 11 years, before founding Taller de Jose, a resource center that connects people in need of services through accompaniment. So I'm going to kind of step back and let them talk a little bit more about their journey. Sister, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I just feel I can't see these people way back there, so.
You can either come up here or you can go there, however you're comfortable.
All right, I'll just do that here.
Sure.
So when I was preparing today, I had multiple directions to go, but one of the things I remembered at the very last minute this morning as I was praying was a gift I received when I first began ministry, which I didn't give a number of years, but I got a box, and in that box there was a wine bottle opener, an extension cord with a 3-pronged plug, and a box of Kleenex. And on reflecting on those gifts, there's a very practical piece about that. You know, you never can find the extension cord. It's always good to have a bottle opener, and it's always good to have a box of Kleenex. But I think those 3 things really talk about skills that we need for ministry. I want to think about the extension cord. Part of being a minister is extending oneself to others. And that means in various ways. At Taller de Jose, we walk with people. So the most important piece of ministry for us is to be totally present to the person who comes to us with their situation, with their problem. It's really important to be plugged in yourself to being educated. So I mean that academically, and I mean being plugged into my faith, taking the time for prayer, for self-reflection. And one doesn't do that alone. Our ministry at Taller is a ministry of accompaniment. So I really believe good ministers are collaborators. They're connected with one another, and they don't think that they can do it only by themselves. It's important to network. And that whole other piece of, yes, being plugged in to one another, to being plugged in to creation and renewal, and being plugged in to God. So that time for reflection, that time for awareness of how God is leading. I think of when we started Taller de Jose, I always say, well, people say, well, how did you plan this ministry? I listened. It really was that whole thing that our Pope is talking about, discernment of where is the next step, the little step that God is calling us to take. The box of Kleenex, you have to let your heart be broken. You have to let your heart be open to the situation, to the moment, and allow others in. But there's the other piece of that, which is also self-care. You have to be able to you can't be broken and extended so much that you're not caring for yourself. And wherever your primary responsibility is, whether it's in a community or to a family or to yourself, that piece is essential. And then finally, the wine bottle opener, there has to be a sense of joy and a sense of, I always knew it was time to move from one ministry to the next when it stopped being fun. I used to call it fun. It's not fun anymore. So there needs to be that sense of joy in serving, so that joy and that presence is available to those with whom you minister and those to whom you minister.
Good morning, everyone. So I also have 3 words that I like to use as well. It's a Catholic thing, what can I say? 3 images that I'd wish to think about and invite you to think about when we talk about ministry. One is the forest, the second are silos, and the third is a different language. So as Ryan said, I worked in parish ministry for a while, but then diocesan ministry, and now somehow I'm in the publishing world. So it wasn't in the plans, but that's the big forest, isn't it? And I think a lot of successful ministers are very intent on what the trees are. We have a lot of wonderful trees in the forest, but if we don't really take a look from above, it's just a single tree. And the way I segue into silos is that when I worked for the Archdiocese of Baltimore, we were in the Department of Evangelization, and we in parish ministry and diocesan ministry love our silos. Heaven forbid the catechist talk to the liturgist, but isn't the catechist the liturgist, and isn't the liturgist the catechist? We have spent so many years setting up these strong silos, and I think our Holy Father is giving us a great example to break down the silos. It's when everything breaks apart and gets messy, that's when the forest really gets interesting. And the most successful people I've seen in ministry are those who are willing to speak a different language. I know a bunch of music friends back in the East Coast who, when it's time for an RCI rite or something with religious ed, just hand me the script. I don't need to know what a scrutiny is. Right now, the diocesan music director doesn't even know what election is, rite of election. We have to be willing to speak another language. The disciples certainly, I think on that Pentecost event, they were shocked. They were more than afraid. And I think, as we heard this morning, is that we should be uncomfortable. That's when the Holy Spirit is sending down those Pentecostal moments. So I think the most successful people in ministry, and one of the things we were asked to prepare when we were thinking of our thoughts today is, what makes a candidate a great candidate? If I saw the resume of a musician, I'm going to put that aside. But I see a disciple who's good at music, and they are getting called in for the interview. You can see discipleship on a resume, and if you can't, it's being thrown away. We spent the last many years hiring the best musician, but there's no ministry. So I know I'm being a little dramatic here, but so anyway, some of the other things that are just cannot underestimate, and Sister got them in the beginning, is collaboration. Collaboration is not, here I've decided and now you do. It's co-laboring, co-workers in the vineyard. I'm going to see what gift you have and see what you bring to the table. The next is organization. I was doing a worship aid, designing a worship aid one year, and someone said, "Oh, this is so professional." Well, what are we? We're professionals in discipleship. And why is that shocking? Delegation. That is huge. Delegation, and then the next word I'm using is empowerment. People know when something's being dumped on their desk, but people know when they are empowered to be the best disciple that they can be. So when we look as far as ministry is concerned, it's looking at being the best professional we could be so that we could go forth and really spread the gospel for what it's deserved to be. Amen.
Thanks. Good morning. I should first say that Charis Ministries is a Jesuit ministry to people in their 20s and 30s. So what I'm going to be saying is comes from that experience as well as my parish experience. Charis does retreats, Ignatian retreats for people in their 20s and 30s here in Chicago, but we also have partners in 35 cities who we train to give our retreats. So we're a national ministry in that regard. So one of the main things, as Mike was saying, that we were asked to do is to talk about what an ideal candidate would be for your organization. And for me, one of the key words that comes up is flexibility. I think people in ministry today have to be flexible. And that doesn't mean being a jack of all trades, as many people in ministry end up being. But it means this willingness to take on new tasks, to learn new skills, to cross-train with other people in the organization. That willingness to learn, and especially in the area of technology, for our organization is critical. We are using technology more and more to reach people because that's where they are. And not only those in their 20s and 30s, as we all know. Fastest growing group on Facebook is women over 50. So, the church has to be there. So that's one of those skills that people have to be flexible enough to be willing to be open to gaining those kinds of skills and trying to decide or trying to create ways in which we can evangelize using those tools. Openness and honesty, very important. I think we're not a top-down organization at Charis. We work completely as a team. The employees of Charis are all young adults, so we need their voice. We need their voice in the church in general, not just in Charis Ministries. So this, again, as Mike was talking about, cutting across the silos, it's very important that we're collaborative, that we're open and honest with each other. And we also look for positive energy. There's a lot of negative energy in the church. When we look for people at Charis, we want positive energy, the joy, the belief in the mission. So, at the base, they have to be people of prayer. They have to believe in the mission. They have to really want to reach other young adults and bring them closer to Jesus Christ. But that vocation also comes with a profession. And again, we are ministry professionals, and that's something else that we look for in people who come to Charis, that sense of themselves as a professional. I will not allow myself to be overworked and underpaid and, or disrespected, any of those things. We're looking for people who understand that about ministry, the professionalism of it. Also, people in the organization need to understand that ministry exists because people are donating money to allow people to be paid and to work in ministry. So we expect people at Charis to be open, to being aware of how Charis runs as a business, and to be willing to engage in what helps it sustain itself. So that's, from the beginning, we want everyone to be aware of that, because everything we do, and I was in parish work for 13 years, but everything you do at the parish also has an effect on sustainability. The way you answer the phone, the way you deal with people, how hospitable you are, what kind of faith experiences you're calling them into. What are they experiencing there? All of that has to do with the sustainability. So I think that's one thing that we also look for in people, that they're not afraid of that or against that, or don't think we should talk about the fact that there is no ministry without financial support in the background. So that's one of the other things. And beyond that, the collaboration, again, is key. I think more and more in the church, we are working with diminishing resources, and we have to collaborate in order to be good stewards of the resources that we are given. We have to use them well and effectively and efficiently, and not get into a place where our own ego might be putting us into a silo and wanting us to have our own territory. We can't really afford to do that anymore in the church. I don't think. So we're always looking for opportunities to collaborate. Who's already doing it so we don't have to recreate the wheel? Let's look for those opportunities. Let's work together. So that would be our ideal person. Thank you.
I'll be different and sit down. I want to pick up on something that Sister Kathy started out with what you found in your office, because it brought to mind the lunchbox that I found in mine when I started. And there were a couple of different things that were in there. One was a fuse with a note that said, "I know you're going to blow yours many times here, so here's a replacement." And the second one was a baby bottle that had a note that said, "There are going to be times that you are going to have to hold and feed and nurture the people that come to see you. Remember, you need it too." So there were going to be times that I was going to have to be receiving the baby bottle instead of just feeding other people. I'd like to pick up on a couple of points that my colleagues here have done, because the first thing that people ask me when they come into my office to talk to me is, am I going to find a job? Yes, there are jobs. There are fewer jobs than there were before, so that means there are going to be more candidates for each job. And how do you distinguish yourself on your resume? Because that's initially what a pastor, if you're looking into parish ministry, is going to look at. So I thought I would address my comments to that, because you want your resume to be a reflection of who you are. So a first point for many of us, myself included, full-time ministry was a second career. Actually, it was a third. So when you put together your resume to send to a pastor, he's not interested in your business background or what you did in corporate. The pastor isn't interested in the return on investment that you got for your clients. The pastor is interested in what you're doing in ministry. So a way in which your resume can be discarded very quickly is to put your corporate or business experience first, because what that says to the pastor is you are not identifying yourself as a minister. You're still identifying yourself in the corporate world. So you want to minimize the amount of space in your resume for your business background and emphasize what gifts you are bringing to this particular ministry for the position that you're looking for. These are leadership positions. Your leadership is going to come through. The skills that you bring for leadership are going to come through in how you present yourself in that resume. So the pastor is going to look for a variety of experiences, a variety of ministry experiences, because as a leader in the parish, you're probably going to be responsible for several, and they would like to see if you've got a broad background. So another key to put in your resume is if you say you want to be a pastoral associate and concentrate on liturgy, just as an example. When the pastor looks at your ministry experience, I hope he finds some experience there in liturgy. If he doesn't, because of the stack of resumes that he has, yours will go out. Parishes can't afford, as Pam said, to hire someone to let you cut your teeth on something new that you haven't experienced before. Volunteer in your parishes in a variety of things and list that volunteer experience. It will help you. Okay. You want to distinguish yourself in your resume, but that doesn't mean embellishing or exaggerating what you've done. be accurate, but put yourself in a good light. And remember the audience that you are addressing with your resume. So know some key terminology for the diocese. In the Archdiocese of Chicago, for example, the terms pastoral associate and lay ecclesial minister mean very specific things. We don't self-select as a lay ecclesial minister. The only one who has the authority to give you that designation is the Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago. I have pastors who do call when someone puts down on a resume, lay ecclesial minister from a year, and ask me, was this person called? You'd be surprised to know that I actually have a list in my office of everyone who has ever been called through the rite of calling for the Archdiocese of Chicago. If they call and ask, I check the list. I hope your name is on it. I hope it matches the year that you say you were called, because that's another thing that we have found is people put down years that we didn't have a rite of calling. The same with listing pastoral associate. Pastoral associate means that you've been certified. Pastors do call when you say you've served as a pastoral associate to find out whether you, A, have been certified, and B, are still in good standing with your certification. So that's also an important thing to remember. And back to, as the last point, in knowing terminology, it's lay ecclesial minister. It's not lay ecclesiastical minister. It's not lay ecclesiastical minister. When you're talking to a pastor and you're using those terms, it helps to have them right, because it lets the pastor know that you really do have an understanding of what these things mean. In different dioceses, it's going to be different. But if you're here, please make sure that you have an understanding of how things are done in this diocese when you're preparing those materials. Because, as I said, when a pastor has a stack a foot high on his desk to go through in resumes, it becomes very easy for him to start separating those out when they look for these things. The leadership that you have is reflected in those resumes. Put yourself in the best light you can without embellishing and overstating what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. When Ryan introduced me, I'm Mary, by the way, he left out the most important part of my bio, is that I am a CTU alum. Twice, okay? So it took me 8 years to get my Master's of Pastoral Studies. Then I took 2 years off, and then I came back for my DMin program. So I can say to you clearly, without a doubt, that one of the key elements in ministry is perseverance. As Winston Churchill said years ago, never, never, never give up, because you're all here. We're all here because, as Mark Francis said earlier, God called us. You didn't get a call from the pastor. We hear a lot when we talk about ministry. Ministry is life-giving. It comes from a place deep within us. A place of spirit where God has called us, and we've answered. And we hear so much the term, oh, I'm burning out. I believe, from my experience, you cannot burn out in a ministry position that God has called you to do, because ministry is life-giving. It's like tapping into a well that has no bottom, and that's how you know you're in the right place at the right time where God has called you. Again, we talked about this earlier today. When you're not when it seems like it's a burden, then you're probably not in the right place, because ministry should be joyful. You should be passionate. Why? Because as ministers, we're really, one of our jobs is to unleash the Spirit upon another, to help people on their spiritual journey. And they're only going to catch our spirit if it's coming out of us in joy and in wisdom. I worked at a parish while I was going to CTU as a director of liturgy. And, for 12 years, I was the full-time director of liturgy at St. Mary's in Downers Grove. And that was a world that is, the liturgical world is run by rules and regulations. And so when I left there, after I got my DMin degree, I knew that I had outgrown the parish. And so this wonderful calling from God came to be the executive director of Maze Lake Ministries in Lombard. And Maze Lake Ministries is a center for spirituality. Now, what a difference it was from going from a liturgical world to a world where you held people's souls in your hands, where their hearts were there. And we have 26 spiritual directors on staff, affiliates. They have other day jobs, some at parishes, but they come and they walk the journey with people. And one of the things that I hold most sacred is that a minister needs to be open. You never know who's going to be sitting in front of you. And we need to meet people where they are, not where we think they should be, or not where the church says they should be. If we think of it like breadcrumbs, you're constantly feeding people breadcrumbs so that they eventually come and taste the banquet through the word and sacrament. But we're not the Messiahs, so we do our best and then we get out of the way and let God take over. Because the minute we think, well, what am I doing? What am I doing? No, it's never you. It's how I'm allowing the Spirit to work through me, how I'm allowing Christ to use my voice, my mind, my hands, my heart. Then you've got the heart of a minister. So always remember, you're just a vessel. God called, you answered, and it's a step out of the boat moment. You never know where God is going to lead you, who God's going to put in front of your path. But if you know that God is at your heart, leading and guiding you, you'll be just fine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments and those reflections. Just thinking a little bit about what they've shared, and then we'll open it up to your comments and questions. Some of the things that I heard in the conversation or in their reflections, some key traits: flexibility, openness, honesty, collaboration, positive energy, professionalism, good stewardship, perseverance, joy, wisdom. And we had some really good analogies, I think, as well. Extension cords, baby bottles, fuses, Kleenex, stepping out of a boat, right? So all of this is what has been shared for us this morning. What questions do you have about any of these traits or analogies or wonderings or reactions? And please come up to the mic here, or if you have a loud voice like I do, you can just stand and kind of ask your question. But where are you with this? Oh, they're saying don't shout because the mic is tapped into the video. So we would love to. Surely that sparked something. I know it has. It's like, who wants to be the first, right? No one wants to be the first.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question of you, and I don't know who among you are actually going out and looking for ministry jobs, but what do you find in the places where you're going? What do you see that they're looking for?
That's a good question. Don't be shy.
I can answer that.
All right.
We'll just talk amongst ourselves up here.
Sure. So what we're looking for, I have a good friend in D.C. who's been out of a ministerial position for over 2 years now, and he's trying to find a church music job, which, especially here in Chicago, but all around the country, it's becoming more and more part-time only. And so there's this full-time job that opened up at a Paulist parish in New York City, and he's putting together his resume and asked if I would look at it. I said, well, nothing in here talks about the Paulist charism. He's like, well, what does my resume have to do with the Paulist charism? I said, then how do you think you're going to get a job with the Paulists? And he's like, well, I don't even know what the Paulist charism is. So same thing with liturgy training publications. We have people applying for our positions who are like you were saying, just not getting the words right, not even caring that liturgy has something to do with the Catholic Church. So, it's like, oh, I could do great art. Well, that's spectacular, So I think to kind of go to answer your question is, we are just looking for people who have done their homework. In addition to liturgy training publications, I was trying to find a music position. I interviewed for 6 parishes, turned down 5 of them because they were just looking for a musician. Offered all the positions, but it was the one that made the right match. So you have to know a little bit about the place that you're applying for before it's even going to work. Because wouldn't you rather just be someplace where the joy is present, where it's the right match, and not a paycheck? And some are, but that's my view.
Yeah, I would add, just please look at the website before you talk to us. I mean, like Karis, everything's on our website, and people will apply, and they have no idea what we do, to your point. That's just silly.
I'll add on with that. With that also is, if you're looking for a parish job, don't just stop at the parish website. Go there to worship. Go there on a Sunday and see what the place is like, and see how you think you could fit there. There are some places you're not going to be able to fit in. You might as well find that out right away before you say yes to the job and 3 weeks later tell the pastor that you want to quit. Go there and go at different times. Try a Saturday evening Mass. Do a Sunday Mass. Go and see what the life of that community is like. Because then when you interview, you'll be able to offer some experiences back to the pastor and to the interview team about what you found there, what was life-giving for you when you were there. That's all part of knowing the audience that you're going to be working with.
Yeah, I think a couple important pieces that folks have raised is the fit piece, and keeping in mind that job searching is in real ways discernment. It isn't, I need a job. You do need a job, and that's fine. But it's more than that, in the sense that, is this a good fit for me? Is this a place that I can come, I think I can feel alive? Is the charisms of this place, or charism, does this reconcile well with my own sense of being and faith? So I think in some ways what people sense is, I'm going to approach this job search like I would perhaps others in maybe business, which there's nothing wrong with that, but this is different. And this has a qualitative difference about it in the sense that it needs to be a good fit and a good match. And I think doing your homework, I think going there and experiencing the community, all of those I think are good suggestions for, as you discern and as they discern, you can kind of be a part of that process, or that can be a good process for you.
Good morning. I just certainly appreciate the commentary on all of you. And as a more seasoned learner here at CTU, I just want to suggest sometimes that when we look at our gifts, that we're not empty vessels or empty kettles, that become capacitated with some sort of background, And not to suggest that that's not important, but even in my own context, there were skills that I have demonstrated in a previous life, if you will, and extrapolating from that, using those kinds of gifts in a new kind of venue. So I don't want people to get the impression that it's just all the training ministerially that you come with. It is also academically, if you have a background in finance or planning or evaluation or research methods, that some churches may say, oh, we're just looking for that person to write that proposal for us or to get this kind of funding. In my own case, I speak allegedly very well. So my pastor then at the time wanted that to be amplified. He asked me to lead groups in terms of training and other kinds of things like that. So using those volunteer skills as well as the academic training that you might have brought to your environment may also help. Thank you.
That would be particularly important, I think, in your first ministerial position, if you're moving from corporate into ministry, being able to explain how the gifts that you had in the business world now translate into ministry, and being able to use them that way. But it certainly goes beyond that first position too, being able to take something that you've learned in each of your positions and being able to then translate that into what your next position is going to look like and be.
Thank you so much for your wonderful insights. I noticed that one of the words that, or phrase that I heard was burnout, and you talked about prayer and burnout, and you had said about that you can't burn out if you're in a ministry that you're really called to be in. How do you find the balance between ministry, between prayer, and, well, discernment, and how do you do that?
Well, it's not an easy task to find balance between your ministry work, family life, whatever else you're doing, and prayer. One of the things that you always have to do in ministry is have boundaries, because ministry at its heart is other-centered, and so people, can you do this? Yes. Can you do that for me? Can you do this? And then before you know it, you're doing everything for everybody. So you really have to learn, again, where you are most, the areas that you're most passionate about, stay in those areas, because in another area, someone else is going to be as passionate, and all of us work together. And so be able to say, you know what, no, I don't think I have those gifts and skills, but every single day you have to carve out time for prayer, however prayer is for you, because we can only give what we have. And if we just keep giving and we are not being fed ourselves in our own prayer life, and I know we're all, then you can burn out. But again, that's happening because you're not tending to your own spirit as well. So while we're tending to other spirits, we need to be taking care of our own souls. Very, very important. Thank you.
I think an important piece that they've shared is what do you need to be fully alive? Not just to fully do your work, that too, but what are those things? And in the past I've had people say, write them down and go back to them, because if you love to draw, if you love to write, if you love to go to sporting events, you need to still be doing those things to nourish who you are, whatever that is. And so I've encouraged people that I've encountered to say, when they're stressful and I don't have enough time, and you may not, ministers seldom do, right, have enough time. But you make time for the things that are going to feed your soul so you can do the work. So I guess one of those things to reflect on is, what are my go-to things that I need for myself in order to be myself? Linda, did you?
So I work for the Archdiocese of Chicago, and I'm so glad that we're talking about this, because in a lot of ways the most practical thing is, here we have this call, how do I manifest it in something, in a job, basically, and because many of us are lay people who need to work. So these are just some things that I've noticed that are very important. If you're applying for a job with pastors, and I've talked to pastors about this because I'm in the business of training lay ecclesial ministers who want to be able to find their work. And so I've asked them, what is it that you need the most? And they've uniformly all said, somebody that knows how to collaborate and make my job easier. So my big suggestion is know who the pastor is and know the parish, because you guys go to parishes, you know what it's like, know the dynamics, and make yourself utterly indispensable. And my other suggestion is, right now, because of the way finances are, and they're not very good, go ahead and take a part-time job, make yourself indispensable. They will figure out how to make it a full-time job after a while if you make yourself indispensable. I absolutely and completely know that to be a fact. The other thing that I think is really important is just showing up at things. I mean, you might be like, why am I going to this? Why am I going to that? Just show up and have your face be around, because most jobs, I think, are found not by what you know, but by who you know, and just from being around and getting to be part of the atmosphere. And then my other comment is only because this is on my mind, because I'm on a hiring committee for somebody at a diocesan job. So I've gone through a stack of resumes this high, It's been like a part-time job going through all of these. But I have to tell you, the most significant thing to me is the cover letter, is a well-thought-out, short, brief cover letter that integrates what you've done and what your skills are with the specific needs of this job. And so it's the cover letter. And a lot of times when people just submit a resume, I don't get to know them very well. And then to see that they write well, that they have proper English, that they can articulate a complex idea in a small paragraph. So anyway, those are just some really practical things that I've been noticing.
I just want to nuance the make yourself indispensable piece. I understand the point that you're coming from, and it is really putting yourself out there to be, to meet the needs that are present in the ministry. But I also think a good minister, on one hand, and I know this isn't what you're saying, so I don't want people to hear this, you know that you're really not, you are dispensable. I mean, it isn't about, and I know you're not saying that, but it isn't about you. It's about your presence, but if you walk away tomorrow, hopefully the ministry is going to continue. So I know that wasn't the piece, but I wanted to just say that, lest someone hear that other side.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And I think it's that discipleship training that we offer. The only way we get more disciples is from other disciples. I was at this parish for 8 years, and it was 3 days before Christmas that my pastor was removed. And as a 29-year-old pastoral associate, guess who the diocese comes to? So that was a long 11 months that when you talk about call and discernment and talk about, Lord, make me an instrument because I don't want to get up and face this anymore. The biggest fear of leaving a parish is also probably your biggest success, is the care, the level of ministry doesn't go anywhere. You're missed as a person. You're missed as a disciple. That parish grew in a year of scandal because the sense of discipleship, the collaboration, it was this, it was how do we, it was very early New Testament. It was the leader comes from within, and how do we preach the gospel, even through hurt? So I think that's it. I challenge you, make yourself indispensable. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there were no full-time ministers, that the whole parish, I'm not advocating this because I'd be out of a job, but the level of care continues. And isn't that what should happen when a pastor moves on? You know, the flock identifies the flock. And if we're not doing that, then we're just kind of following whatever it may be. So I don't even know where I was going with that, but I think you heard me. So,
And could I just say, one of the other things they asked us to talk about was the qualities or skill sets that are not so obvious to success within the ministerial field. And I think I want to go back a little bit to some of the business skills that the woman was speaking about earlier, and that we had mentioned. I think, and I was in international banking for many years before I went into ministry. So I come out of that, I admit that. But I must say that I was director of religious education, And I think 75% of what I did used my business skills more than my ministerial skills. Because we were budgeting, we were recruiting, we were training, we were managing databases. You know, all of those things are very needed skills in the church. Because if we don't have those skills, again, we're not doing the job as efficiently as we can, and therefore we are wasting these limited resources that we are working with. So for me, those business skills, it's just really important. Like, you know, they have a lot of courses for non-financial managers. So it's like finance for non-financial managers. It's like a one-day workshop. It kind of teaches you to look at a budget and, you know, all those things, so that when your finance committee, if you're in a parish, comes to you and they're talking to you about your budget, you're not just taking what they give you, but you are interacting with them and advocating for yourself, and can do that. I think, you know, I always said in the parish, well, the budget is a theological document, you know. You know, where is your emphasis? Where is your emphasis? So we need to be able to advocate for ourselves and not feel as though everyone knows more than we do about those things. So I'm really an advocate for kind of educating ourselves on that, you know, as part of the professionalism.
Yeah, as Pam was talking, I couldn't help but think of Richard Rohr book and philosophy, theology really. He says, everything belongs, you know, and so if you're wanting or going into ministry and you have these varied backgrounds, which a lot of people do, everything belongs somehow. Like mining the wisdom of that to, yes, have a theology and to have the language and the vocabulary, but everything belongs. Like God didn't, you know, the path that you have chosen, the journey is there for a reason. And so I think, you know, we identify with that sense of how do we use our own experiences to help us move forward.
I think many of us in the room are religious, and I was wondering if any of you could share your experiences of starting new ministries. I think many of our communities, maybe we see kind of a shift from what our traditional institutions of education and healthcare may be, and really looking to meet the needs of what we see in the world and in our communities, and creating new ministries to meet those needs. And as Sister Kathy, like with Taller de Jose, we saw a need in the city of Chicago, and how the discernment process around creating a new ministry to meet an unmet need in our communities happens. If anyone can share any of that.
Was that my segue? We've done it. So I'm a co-founder of Taller de Jose, which is a new ministry, and the way that ministry came up was basically it was a group of people had an idea, and it was an idea to get back into being in the city. My congregation wanted to do that, and we wanted to meet the needs of the people in the city. We didn't know what that meant. We didn't know where it meant, and so basically we started talking to a pastoral staff about what are some of the needs that the parish is experiencing. Long story short, came up with this idea that people need to connect to resources. They don't really know how to do that. There are resources. People need to connect. And then we tested that out with members of the community through an advisory board, and then talking to various agencies to see how that ministry fits. So we didn't come in with the idea like we're gonna do this. We're gonna come in and we're gonna have a legal clinic because we think that's what everybody needs here. That wasn't it. The idea came from the grassroots, and so I think it's this. Someone in the panel talked about, and it might have even been the keynote speaker, but this idea of thinking outside of the box and being present to something new, what's bubbling up, what's emerging, not being caught in our old ways, and then just taking the step and trying it out. And I remember actually the other person who began the ministry with me once we were established, I kept saying, well, we don't have this, and we don't have this, and we don't have that. And she's like, well, let's just open the door and see what happens. Who's going to come? And from 150 people served the first year, we moved to 1,000 served in year 5. So it's take the risk, take the step, be listening, discern, take small steps along the way.
Sister, on a similar note, but a different venue, you know, working in ministry as I do, I think we need to also be, if we're going to build something, we need to be visionaries as well. And we alluded to this earlier, but, you know, 1 billion smartphones and tablets are going to be sold this year alone. This is where people are. This is where our young adults are. This is where the people who are frustrated with the church are. This is where people who in the pew are. They're on their phones, they're on their tablets. And so we have got to be proactive in ministry and to minister, to make those digital disciples that are out there coming to us. You know, think of it as little breadcrumbs where, you know, just putting it out there. At Maze Lake Ministries, my favorite phrase is a step out of the boat moment. And we did that. This week, we launched a mobile website, complete with 25 3-minute videos on like how to read the Bible, or what is faith, what is grief. And those videos are 3 minutes so that people can watch them, hit the share button, and share them with their friends and families across the land. That's evangelization. You've got to think outside of the box because the normal box is not working anymore. The pews are empty. So how are we going to get to the people? I think one of the ways is through social media. The Pope says the internet's the new mission field. Take that and run with it, because really I believe that's where we're going to be finding people in years to come. Thank you.
Yeah, I think both Allison's question and Mary's response highlight something important, and that's in ministry work, you know, there's that well-known saying that, you know, really discernment or ministry is about, you know, where our greatest passions meet the world's greatest needs. So it's not just about, well, what do we love to do and what brings us joy? All of that's great, but it's also thinking, okay, but how do I do that in this world that has challenges? What are those, and where do those meet? It's not just what I love to do, but it's what do I love to do that can have an impact on the reign of God? And so I think both, Mary, you're talking about meeting people where they are, and Allison's questions about there's all these needs out there. That's part of the discernment process between what we want to do as people and as disciples and what the world needs us to do. I think that's an important link. Were you going to say something about that, Mike?
Not about that.
Okay. He's like, no, I wanted to move on. So I think, yes, one more question, and then we'll have them respond, and then we're going to have to finish up.
I'm just curious about the age factor.
Thank you.
Because usually we would find, you know, such requirements as preferably not more than 35 years old. But I don't know whether that applies to ministry or you're more into some who have a lot of experience, or one who is young and more dynamic and more have the technological acumen. So what about the age factor? Thank you.
It's kind of what I wanted to talk about because it hasn't been mentioned. One of the concepts I've been really working on and reflecting on and praying about is this whole image of passing the baton. If we're going to run the race, a certain generation who has put wonderful time and effort into ministry needs to proclaim and apprentice a newer generation. Instead of looking at some of us and saying, oh, you're so young, how did you get so experienced? I think John the Beloved was quite young when he was called. You know, I'm getting really, I'm getting passionate about this now. But age, I was at the gym one day, and I was on the treadmill, and I'm running, and there's this young guy being interviewed by one of the newscasters. And then it said that he was the president's speechwriter. So, of course, I look him up on my phone, 31 years old. Yet in ministry, at 33, I'm being called the baby by the people who started earlier than 30. Pass the baton, folks. The only way we're going to win this race, I'm sorry, I'm just woohoo. Does this make sense, though? So, if you're young in ministry, find out who's going to apprentice you, so you don't have to learn everything that they wonderfully spent the last 40 years learning. Because if they take that to the grave, then and if we drop the baton, the race is over. So there's this great image of Paul and John running to the tomb. And John is so much further ahead than Paul. Yeah, that's what I meant. So that's, the image, the part you don't see in the image is the baton. It's Peter who is past the baton, and John is running past him. So anyway, age-wise, we have to put it in our own hands. No one's going to come out and say, you know what, we want you to be excellent today in a world of mediocrity. You have to go do it yourself. And we have to learn from the wonderful people who have done this ahead of us. Because the greatest legacy we could leave behind are the disciples that picked up after us. And, sorry, I need more coffee.
Glad we have some water up here. So,
It ain't water.
Ryan, can I
well,
add one more thing?
one fast thing. and then-
One real fast thing. A key thing to remember for people on parish staff, you empower your replacement. So you can leave and the ministry stays. That's part of your job when you are on staff, is empowering the people that are there so that you can walk away and move on to something else. And that's the passing the baton in the pastoral staff.
Yeah, and I think the reality of intergenerational work today means that, those who are more seasoned have gifts for the church, and those who are younger have gifts for the church. And they're different, but it's all needed. And that's what we have to celebrate. What a wonderful way to end the panel discussion.